Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Marie Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry coming to you from two socially distant studios at the edge of the Great Red Divide, where every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 o'clock on Facebook, we bring you the progressive news and views that you can use to help you stay informed throughout your day. You can find all of our previous episodes at heartlandmamas.com, on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and proudly part of the Demcast USA network. Murray, today you might notice that I'm wearing a shirt, a blouse, a new blouse I got today from Fashion Concept in Naperville, Illinois. And their slogan is "We make beautiful clothes to make people feel beautiful." And I do love this blouse.
It
So,
is beautiful. I love it too. And you said it, and tell us again where that
it's
wonderful
from
blouse is from.
Fashion Concept in Naperville, Illinois. So it was a nice surprise to
Outstanding.
get in the mail as a potential sponsor. So thank you, Fashion Concept. But we have some really difficult subject matter to discuss today because we are faced again another day, another shooting of somebody not white while doing something white people do without getting shot. And whether you're a 13-year-old boy running through an alley or a 17-year-old boy with an airsoft gun or somebody who wants to escape from a warrant that's out for you, if you're black or Hispanic or not white in the USA, your life is in danger, especially when you drive. You're only almost 80% more likely to be pulled over. And you're very likely to be harmed, arrested, or killed in that uh, in that being pulled over by the police. Murray, when people are pulled over, our police are trained that this is going to be an adversarial moment, that they have to fear whenever they pull over.
You're
Even
right,
though,
Heidi. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Because I
so
totally know what you're saying. It's
yeah,
from an even higher level. It's the philosophy behind it. But tell us a little bit about that training.
so the police are trained that their lives are in mortal danger every time they make a traffic stop, and that very well could be, and in some cases is true, but more often than not, a traffic stop is relatively safe. Now, we all saw the video of the guy that jumped out of his car and shot the police officer. A white man got out with his AK and boom, 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 shot the police officer that pulled him over for speeding in Louisiana a few weeks ago. But that's very rare, okay? And we all have seen the video too of the half black, half Hispanic man that was driving his brand new SUV. We don't know if it was too slow for the officers that pulled him over
In
or if he had
Virginia, are we
in
talking about the
Virginia.
officer, the military officer who was
Right.
pulled
Medic.
over, maced, harassed for no justifiable cause?
There was no reason. He was driving an SUV with tinted windows, white black. I
And
think that was
Heidi,
the reasoning.
you're right on two parts. First, absolutely, that officers are trained to look for wrongdoing. In the United States, our entire philosophy behind the justice system is our police are trained to look for wrongdoing. Look for people who are suspicious. Be on the lookout. They are put through their training in a hyper alert state
Right.
that is fed by the climate in which they're in. But it starts fundamentally that we train them from that perspective. So
Right.
if you look at other nations, look at the UK, look at Scotland, look at Ireland, look at the Netherlands, Sweden. If you look at many, many different societies, Japan, there's a different relationship between the police and citizens
Well,
because they're
Japan.
defined as peacekeepers.
Right.
And so, while I'm not saying that there might not be corruption or there might not be instances that happen,
Right.
fundamentally, they are trained differently. They're trained to be there in the event something happens, to be prepared for something to happen. They're trained with weapons, they're trained in situations, de escalation. But more important, the overreaching arch of being a peace officer is exactly that, a peace officer. So if something does happen, you're prepared, but they're not trained to look at everyone adversarially.
You
And
know,
therefore, the citizens don't return that fear of the police.
when I read a statistic, and I'm sorry I didn't write it down, but at one point the police officers in Japan had gone more than 12 years without drawing a weapon. You can't tell me that there isn't as much angst, theft,
Stress,
stress.
drugs, prostitution, illegal black market. There is just as much everything in different countries as there is here.
Yes, there is in the
But there's
States.
a
We are not
fundamental difference, and that's in the way the
right.
approaches are taken to policing.
Well, you know, policing is a mirror of the society, or the society uses it as a mirror. So when, and we do this with horses, so I hate to make a horse analogy and a police analogy, but when you face a horse with a certain energy, a certain face, they face you back the certain way.
All
And I
living
think that,
creatures.
right. And I think that's very true. And we always talk about changing your mirror image when we're trying to develop a skill with a horse. And I think we see this with policing too, is that you're seeing a certain face, a certain demeanor that is shown to the public, and the public faces you back with that same demeanor. And I want to say that,
And Heidi, another problem with the system the way it is
mhm,
not only does it teach people to be suspicious and always on guard, but it
yeah,
draws people who are naturally suspicious in a heightened state, aggressive, to the profession because of its design. So we're
yeah,
not getting people to even change the tone of policing.
exactly, Murray. You can't, you have to be able to change the tone to be able to have a change in how things are done. And when we go through, you know, right here in Little Marseilles, where I'm broadcasting from, we had a police chief that bought a whole lot of military surplus vehicles. We had armed, armored vehicles for a town of 5,000 people without even a really decent bank in it, right? So what do we think is going to happen here? You know, and they would drive them in parades. So
Well,
you'd go out
remember,
and parade around.
the increased militarization came when we had all these weapons left over after the Cold War and needed
Well, they had to
to
go
sell them to
somewhere,
make a
right?
profit, right?
Right.
Because that's let's then we need to talk about that. That's a
Right.
major component of everything that we do. A major component of it all is the
Um,
profit motive. So, Heidi, we talk about other organizations. Or go ahead. I'm sorry. You keep going, and then I'll go into my diatribe.
and you know what, Murray? It's difficult to watch everything that's happened, you know, with the airsoft gun. After this, the kid with the airsoft gun was taken down. They say he reached for a knife. Did he? Because I also forwarded to you an article today from Christianity Today. I know your favorite publication, but one of mine because it gives some really great insight to how things are working about a woman who suffered um, it, the guilt of her brother supposedly having assaulted and trying to execute the police. So for 10 years she lived with this idea that her brother had tried to murder the police, and she felt that shame and remorse, you know. And then she finds out through, you know, finally getting the truth of the matter that he was shot 10 times in the back and in the back of the head by the police and had no weapon on him. His weapon, if he had one, I can't remember now, was never fired.
Well, now Heidi, that brings us to the exactly what we were talking about. It incorporates power and profit. And the
Right.
profit motive is the more people that are incarcerated, the more lawyers are needed, the more judges are needed, the more jailers are needed. And where do we get a lot of the money for that? It comes from our prison system, from our for
Right.
profit prison system, which does huge
Yeah.
donations to our representatives, to our elected officials. And we've done shows on this. Sheriffs, the problem with sheriffs, the problem with the private prison system. Hey, if you want, please check out past episodes. because we're
Mhm.
referencing things that we go into detail on in the past, and those are on YouTube and everywhere you get your favorite podcasts, and you can probably even
Right.
find them in our Facebook library. But that plays into it, and we talk about systemic racism, right? And a lot of white people just can't even wrap their heads around it. So I'm gonna try to help some white folks here. All right, there are
Of the PR.
countries that are predominantly white, Eastern European countries, and not just predominantly white countries like Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan. Then you move into countries that are in the Middle East who have a similar militaristic style of policing. And you can find them in South America, in Asia. You can find them everywhere they are, right?
South America's terrible. Yeah.
But it's all about the oppression. And we're not realizing as white people that we don't face what the rest of the country faces. A white
Nope.
man has
Nope.
no idea of the
Nope.
reality that a white woman lives in, or a
No.
black woman or a black man, or and the thing that terrifies them is the fact that somehow they believe that if the white woman or the black man is given a voice,
Quality.
then it takes away from them, right? Somehow it doesn't add, it takes away. And
That's nice.
that comes from this nationalistic mentality and the founders of our nation. We're not that different from Russia, guys. We are not that different from China. We're not that different from Brazil. And
Not
here's
on
why:
policing.
because their justice systems are not fair, they are not equitable. They single out people the same way ours does. And the citizens, like Heidi and I were talking about, that hyper vigilant state a police officer is in, even if they're a good person, the most amazing person in the world who would never harbor a prejudice. We talk about internal bias, right? That's a huge thing white people don't understand either, is that you can have biases that don't make you racist, but color or change the way you perceive things. And so combine that, the most kind, heightened, emotional person could snap in that situation. Even someone who would never. So we'd set
Yeah.
up our police officers to become villains because of the way the system works.
Oh, and I hate that idea. I hate that because I have a ton of friends and relatives in law enforcement that are not the bad cops. They are really good people and
But they're
do everything.
working in the system that
They're
is
working in the
designed
system.
to
Yeah.
cause people to fail. And good cops, they don't like the system. They see when a slimeball drug dealer gets off on a technicality and when a kid who made a mistake goes to jail. They don't like that. They don't want to see that. But they're forced to work in the constructs of a system that was designed to oppress.
And Murray, the police are supposed to enforce the laws. They're not supposed to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. They have one job that sometimes they're unprepared for because they don't have the training, the psychological training, the counseling training that is required by another professional, not law enforcement. But yet, this hyper vigilant person is now often becomes judge, juror, executioner, as we've seen over and
And
over and
that's
over again.
where our mythology comes into play. That's where the cowboy, everything can be solved with a gun. America's best. America
Uh,
knows best. American
uh,
exceptionalism, nationalism.
Hollywood,
All of this
Hollywood
rolls
fantasy.
into the systemic racism that feeds this stupid system.
I know Hollywood has made its living on the fantasy that guns equal might equals power equals toughness. Fist fighting solves everything. There's nothing you can't fight if you're, nothing you can't do if you're not stronger. My husband's on this kick of watching the superhero movies, something universe, DC.
Marvel
I don't
Universe?
know. I I don't know. It's got all those little characters in it, like and I don't think Spider-Man's in it, but it's along that line.
Okay.
So I know Groot was in one of them last night and a raccoon. For the life of me, I have no idea because I don't even have time to watch movies. Okay, but their whole thing is whoever's stronger and more violent is right. And I'm watching, and my husband said to me, "But those are villains." And I said, "But the good guys are beating the crap out of people too." I said, "How can any of this be right? How can diplomacy be so wrong that we just have to beat the mess out of everybody?" I don't know. I guess I'd have to watch the movie series, and ain't nobody got time for that. Or some people do because those are major blockbusters. But I
You
look
know,
at it as an outsider looking in, and I'm like, this is more Hollywood myth that gets us all in trouble.
and you're right, Heidi. All of these things compound on each other, and it starts from the moment this nation was born. We talk about this a lot. You guys know I'm an obsessive history nut. The moment this nation was born, it was not born for Heidi and I. It was not born for 60% of those that live here
It was
now.
born for
This
money,
and
money and
power. It was
power.
born for a small amount of power. And those people designed everything we have. That
Hmm.
tiny power hungry group of white men who enslaved people, enslaved the Native American, the indigenous First Nations people, before we even got into importing
Stole their
people from another
land,
country for slavery, right?
nearly
So
starved them to
everything was
death by
built
stealing everything.
on a lie, and it was all
Hmm.
twisted into this narrative of exceptionalism and freedom. And there is no freedom for most people in this country. There is not freedom from oppression. How many, you can't be a black, brown woman of any color and even look cross-eyed without a fear of repercussion. No, this nation is not what everyone thinks it is. And
No,
that's not saying that some aren't so lucky and don't thoroughly get to enjoy the privileges, but they need to realize that that's not everyone.
right. I've read a couple quotes today that just really stuck with me, and one was from Don Siegelman, the last Democratic governor of Alabama. And he wrote, "We live in a world where trained law enforcement officers can panic and act on impulse, but an untrained civilian must remain calm with a gun pointed in their face." Murray, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. There's been a couple of times that I've had guns pointed at me with the intent to shoot and kill me. And it
We
is a
we have to,
horrifying experience. It's a horrifying experience, and I live to tell about it. But so many of these people don't live to tell about it. You don't. And, in the case of the woman in the female police officer that had a really good record, had been on the force for over 20 years, who yelled taser, 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 and then shot somebody with her 9mm. Just bam, blew them away. And in the last 20 years, there was 18 cases where an officer confused their weapon, their gun, with a taser. A gun, I've got a couple. I could bring one
how
out.
many
Weighs a lot. I
years?
don't have a taser. A taser weighs less than half a pound. A gun weighs several pounds. It weighs a couple pounds. And
You
of that, only 8 officers were charged. Now that's involuntary manslaughter, at least, Murray,
right.
when you shoot someone with a gun and you intended to tase them. But these are black people, so
Okay,
only
can I
8 of
tell
them
you
were
my
prosecuted.
perception of that? I don't
With that,
believe that she said taser, 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 that she
I
was
heard her.
going to shoot. No, 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 listen. She did say those words. But
Yeah,
everyone is taking it that her intent was, I'm going to use my taser, I'm going to use my taser, I'm going to use my taser. I
yeah,
do not believe that was the case. From her inflection and what happened, remember, she was training a rookie officer that day. The way she said it sounded like she was yelling at him, taser, taser, get your taser out. Taser, taser.
Oh,
And when
see,
he
I took it.
didn't,
He
and he
didn't
started to drive away, she freaked and shot him. She didn't mistake the two. She was telling her rookie to tase him while she had
think
the
that's how
gun
it went.
trained. I do. I think that's exactly how it went.
You know what, Marie? Judge, jury, and executioner. Again. Again, the police are not there to be the judge, jury, and executioner. They're there to enforce the laws. And then it goes in front of a judge to see if it is a law that needs to be enforced. Correct? Isn't that how this is supposed to work? And even if he had a warrant and hadn't responded to it, and I heard all that bullshit when we were passing the laws here in Illinois to change policing and to change people being arrested by warrants, because a lot of this violence happens at that time. And the one good thing that came out of COVID is now we can address warrants, court actions remotely via Zoom. And they've found that with that, fewer people miss their court dates because they don't have to worry about getting off work, right? They can just go right to their court case and then go right back to work. And I keep thinking we can keep evolving, people. We don't have to stay static in where we are.
You're right. Absolutely. And that's just it. That's one of the frustrations is that, like we talked about all the time in every aspect of our show, our society was created and designed by a tiny group of people with a very small mindset that was to grow and have power, not with anyone else in mind. That is why it is imperative that our nation grows. And if we understand that policing came from slave patrols, that it was militarized, that it is adversarial, but we don't blame all of the officers. The entire system is designed for them to fail. Even if they find another officer doing something wrong, then they build in the layers of almost military don't ask, don't tell. So it's the blue line, right? And there's that inherent threat for those officers that they could, somebody couldn't show up for a call when you need backup. But that wouldn't even be an issue if we trained people and hired people and restructured the way we look at policing.
Well, we really need to. And we really need to reconstruct how the grand jury operates as well, Marie, because the grand jury operates in secrecy. So a lot of this stuff, when the police have a shooting, there is not immediate repercussions. Now, there have been, since George Floyd, I've noticed that chiefs and mayors are getting right on it now, right? Now, all of a sudden, people are pissed, so they better step up and do something immediately. But so often, it waits till it goes before a grand jury, so the grand jury can see all of the secret tapes, because the body cam footage, now in Chicago, it has to be released because we've had some pretty horrific incidents in Illinois, in Chicago. But
Mayor Lori Lightfoot is releasing the tape this afternoon of the most recent shooting of the Toledo.
Oh, God, of the 13-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. He's 13 years old. I know that the police don't know that at the time. But could we have handled that situation differently?
There could be any number of reasons why he was out at night. Maybe quiet, working on something, doing homework, couldn't sleep, went for a walk to get some peace. He
could have been up to no good.
He could have been up to no good, but none of those things matter what his intention was. He didn't do anything to deserve what he got.
Oh, Marie? Seriously, I know.
So we have to stop policing for prevention and assuming everyone is doing something wrong and look at it from another perspective.
Policing to kill, Marie. That's what it comes down to. But I wanted to get back to the grand jury thing.
Kill or capture?
Yeah.
Capture is profitable, far more profitable than killing.
Than kill. But if you get rid of them right away, but now so much of it comes out because so many people are out there filming, right? And in Illinois,
and body cameras are becoming law in most areas.
Illinois, you have to wear a body camera and you have to keep it on, And
but that's a Band-Aid. And yes, it's a good step. And I know, there are law enforcement organizations against it. And that's a step. But we always talk about these steps, right? We're fixing something like a federal registry for law enforcement so that if you have past actions on your record, that follows you. So you can't go from state to a county
and continue
Illinois doing bad acts. But, these things are great and they can help, like you said, incrementally. But until we make the fundamental shift in the way we see our society, instead of wrongdoers and right doers, good guy gun, bad guy gun, when we stop polarizing everything, we won't need the laws as much to protect people. You'll never have to check body cams. Maybe
Right.
a police department once every 3 weeks, once a month. But it's not going to be a daily instance. Those are great band aids, but we have to just fix it from the bottom up.
Well, in Murray, fixing systemic racism, which is redlining, which means that we have pockets of poverty, it on purpose within our metropolitan areas, on purpose, we have redlining. And even though it's not supposed to go on now, you and I both know it still does, right? So we have this redlining, and it's created these pockets of poverty. It's also created, like in some states that are trying to pass voter ID laws, it because of poverty, there are people that are my age or older that have no ID because they have no birth certificate because poverty, right? So, and that's not the only thing. It's just so complex and so aggravating when you can see what the right thing to do is. And the right thing to do is to say, in our Constitution, it says all men are created equal when they meant all white men are created equal, which they're not because there's socioeconomic classes that change that for everybody. But if we can change the equality issue and atone and address racism with
And be
real
honest
thought,
about it
yes,
and looking through our history and saying, hey, 200, 300 years of this hasn't
or
worked.
465 years, Murray, it's enough.
It
Enough
is.
already.
So I'm
Mercantilism is
hoping.
so deeply flawed, it doesn't work. We are going to fail as a society unless we can correct our basic racist constructs.
Unless we can demystify the myth of American exceptionalism. And
Yeah.
once we do that and go from American exceptionalism to American acceptableism, all right, that's probably not what I was going with that, but
No.
until American acceptance, right?
Okay.
That
But
is when we will become successful.
can't we be exceptional by creating
Exactly.
equality for everyone?
Exactly.
Wouldn't that
That's
make us
and
exceptional?
that's like it's like massive gaslighting. We've all been gaslit since the day we were born. You know, we're all equal. That's what we get told over and over, but we see that that is not true in any way, shape, or form. So we're all living under a lie, and it's time we demand that that lie be addressed. Let's fix the lie. Let's start with the truth. So, guys,
Um,
thank you so much for
yes. Thank
tuning
you so
in
much for tuning in.
today. We are the Heartland Mamas, coming to you live Tuesdays and Thursdays on Facebook at 3 p.m. We also have an independent radio show called Heartland Mamas Unrolled. You can find us everywhere. Most important thing you can do for us is like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you soon, Heartland Mamas.
MAMAS.com. Don't forget to smash that follow button on YouTube
And
because
share.
and share because somebody is going to get a free Heartland Mamas t-shirt, which I'm not wearing today because thank you Fashion Concepts for my blouse today. Fashion Concepts, Naperville, Illinois. I really do appreciate the shirt. And we'll see you later, everybody. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.